I thought I had just made the smartest investment of my life. Not just a good deal, not just a lucky find, but the kind of decision that changes everything. The kind you look back on years later and say, that's where it all started. 2,300 acres of land. Let that sink in for a second. 2,300 acres. Endless space. Rolling terrain that seemed to stretch forever. Clusters of thick trees. Open fields that caught the sunlight just right. And silence. Real silence. No traffic. No distant noise. No neighbors. Just wind moving through the trees, and the feeling that, for the first time in a long time, I had room to breathe. For years, I had been searching for something like this. Not just land, but freedom. A place that wasn't controlled by someone else. A place where I didn't have to follow endless rules, or deal with crowded developments, or worry about someone building right next to me. I wanted space, control, possibility. Maybe I'd build a private home someday. Something simple, peaceful, away from everything. Or maybe I'd turn it into a long-term investment. Let it grow in value. Develop parts of it slowly. Do things the right way. Or maybe, just maybe, this could become something even bigger than I imagined. But finding land like that? It's not easy. Every time I found something promising, there was always a catch. Too expensive, way over market value, or buried under restrictions, zoning issues, environmental limitations, access problems, or worse, already surrounded by development that completely ruined the point of having land in the first place. So over time, I became careful, patient. I stopped jumping at opportunities. I started analyzing everything, looking deeper, asking more questions. Because in real estate, the biggest mistakes happen when things look too good. And that's exactly why. It made me cautious. Because it felt almost unreal. The price? Lower than expected. Not suspiciously low, but low enough to make me pause. The description? Simple. Too simple. The seller claimed the land had been in their family for decades. Unused. Untouched. Just sitting there. Waiting. No recent development. No active use. No complications. On the surface, it sounded perfect, but I didn't trust perfect. So I did what I always do. I slowed down. I didn't rush. I didn't get emotional. I started checking everything. Piece by piece. Detail by detail. Title search. Clean. No hidden claims. No overlapping ownership. No legal confusion. Ownership history. Consistent. It passed from one generation to another. Nothing unusual. No sudden transfers. No suspicious gaps. No active disputes. No ongoing legal issues tied to the land. No lawsuits. No complaints. Nothing. No strange legal flags. Nothing buried in the documents that raised concern. Even the survey maps matched perfectly. Every boundary line. Every measurement. Everything aligned with the official records. I cross-checked multiple sources. County records. Independent verification. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. This land was exactly what it appeared to be. And after weeks of checking, double-checking, and going over every possible concern I could think of, I reached a decision. Everything told me the same thing. This was a solid deal. So I bought it. And I still remember the exact feeling, the exact moment, the exact breath I took. The day it officially became mine. I drove out there early in the morning. Sun just starting to rise. Light cutting through the trees. The air felt different. Cleaner. Quieter. I stepped out of my truck and just stood there. And in that moment, there was only one thought in my mind. This is it. A pause. A deep breath. This is the one. For the first couple of weeks, everything felt normal. Exactly how I imagined it would be. I started making plans. Walking parts of the land. Exploring different sections. Marking potential spots where I could build. Higher ground. Better views. Areas with natural shade. Places near water. I'd spend hours out there. Sometimes just walking. Sometimes sitting quietly. Thinking. Planning. Visualizing what this place could become. And every time I left, I felt the same thing. Confidence. Like I had made the right move. Like this was going to work out. But here's the thing. Looking back now, there was one detail I completely overlooked. One simple mistake. I had only explored the outer areas. The parts that were easy to reach. The edges of the property. The sections closest to the main access points. I never went deep inside. Not really. Not far enough. At the time, it didn't seem important. The land was huge. I figured I'd explore the rest later. There was no rush. No urgency. Everything seemed fine. And that was my first mistake. Because about 2 weeks later, I decided it was time. Time to go deeper. Time to actually see everything I owned. So I got in my truck. Early afternoon. Clear sky. And started driving further in than I had before. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Dirt paths. Uneven ground. Patches of trees. Open fields stretching out in every direction. The same quiet. The same calm. The same sense of isolation. I drove slowly, taking it all in, letting the space unfold around me. Minutes passed, then more minutes, then more. And that's when something changed. This wasn't worn down over time. This was built. A fully paved road. Smooth surface. Fresh markings. Clean edges. Maintained. I stopped the truck for a second, just staring at it, trying to process what I was seeing. That didn't make any sense. Who would build something like this? In the middle of nowhere? On land that had supposedly been untouched for years? On my land. I pulled forward slowly, driving onto the road. The tires felt different immediately. Smooth. Even. This wasn't old either. This was maintained. Regularly. I kept driving. At first, I told myself, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just an old access road. Maybe it leads somewhere outside the property. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Curiosity started turning into confusion. Confusion started turning into concern. Because the road didn't end. It kept going. Straight. Clean. Purposeful. And the further I went, the clearer it became. This wasn't random. This was intentional. Then, up ahead, I saw something that made me slow down even more. A structure. At first, just a shape. Then clearer. Then undeniable. A gate. A large, decorative, entrance gate. The kind you don't see on empty land. The kind designed to welcome people in, or keep others out. Stone pillars. Metal framework. Carefully designed details. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't abandoned. This was active. I rolled closer. Heart beating a little faster now. And then I saw it. Right in the center. Mounted clearly. Impossible to miss. A sign. Clean. Bold. Professional. And written across it. Silver Creek Estates. Private HOA community. I stopped. Completely. Engine still running. Hands on the steering wheel. Eyes locked on that sign. HOA? Private community? Here? On my land. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't even fully process it at first. I just stared, reading the words again and again, hoping somehow they would change. Hoping I misunderstood. But I didn't. It was real. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about that land started to fall apart. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I missed something. Maybe this section wasn't included in the purchase. Maybe there was shared ownership. Maybe some legal agreement I overlooked. Maybe. But deep down, there was a feeling I couldn't ignore. A quiet realization building in the back of my mind. Because nothing about this made sense. And when something doesn't make sense in real estate, there's always a reason. I drove past the gate slowly. Not confidently. Not casually. But carefully. Like I was crossing into something I didn't fully understand yet. Half expecting someone to stop me. Half expecting a guard, a camera, a voice calling out. Hey, you can't be here. But no one did. No alarms. No security. No questions. Just silence. And the slow sound of my tires rolling over perfectly paved road. As I crossed through the entrance, everything changed. The wild, untouched land I had just been driving through was gone. Completely gone. And in its place was something I never expected to see. A neighborhood. Not an unfinished project. Not construction. Not a temporary setup. A real, fully developed, lived-in community. I slowed down even more. Almost crawling at this point. Trying to take it all in. Trying to understand what I was looking at. Because what I was seeing didn't match reality. Not the reality I thought I had just bought. It looked like a completely normal neighborhood. But not just any neighborhood. This was high-end. Carefully planned. Professionally built. Large houses stood on both sides of the street. Each one different, but clearly part of the same design vision. Fresh paint. Modern architecture. Spacious driveways. Garages. Front porches. Every detail looked intentional. Every house looked lived in. And then there were the lawns. Perfectly trimmed grass. Green. Even. Maintained. Not a single patch out of place. Sprinklers running quietly in the background. Flowers planted along walkways. Small trees lining the streets. This wasn't just development. This was upkeep. Ongoing care. The streets were clean. No cracks. No debris. Fresh markings. Parked cars lined the driveways. Some new, some older, but all clearly in use. And then I noticed something that made it even more surreal. People. Real people. Kids riding bikes down the street. Laughing. Completely unaware of anything unusual. A couple walking their dog. Talking casually. Glancing at me for a second as I drove by. Then continuing like it was just another normal day. Two neighbors standing near a driveway. Chatting about something simple. Ordinary. Routine. It was peaceful. Calm. Organized. Established. And that's what made it worse. Because this wasn't temporary. This wasn't new. This wasn't something that just appeared overnight. This place had history. Time. Routine. People had built lives here. Memories. Daily habits. And somehow, all of it existed inside land that legally belonged to me. That thought kept repeating in my head. Over and over again. This is my land. This is my land. But what I was seeing didn't feel like mine. It felt like I was the outsider. Like I didn't belong there. Like I had just driven into someone else's world. And that feeling, that disconnect, was unsettling. Deeply unsettling. I kept driving for a few more minutes. Just observing. Not stopping. Not interacting. Just trying to understand. Trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. But the more I saw, the less it added up. So I made a decision. Right then and there. I wasn't going to confront anyone. Not yet. Not without answers. I didn't knock on any doors. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't cause a scene. Because this wasn't something you handle emotionally. This was something you handle carefully. Strategically. I slowly turned the truck around. Drove back toward the gate. Past that same sign again. Silver Creek Estates. Private HOA community. And this time, it hit differently. Because now I knew. It wasn't just a sign. It was a problem. A big one. I drove out. Back onto the open land. And didn't stop until I was completely off the property. And real answers. Not guesses. Not assumptions. The next morning, I didn't waste time. I sat down with a real estate attorney. Someone experienced. Someone who had seen complicated situations before. Because whatever this was, it wasn't normal. I laid everything out. The purchase documents. The title reports. The survey maps. The boundary lines. Every detail. And then, I told him what I saw. At first, he didn't react much. Just listened. Calm. Neutral. Professional. Then he asked a few questions. Simple ones. Clarifying details. Trying to understand the situation. And I could tell. He thought I was exaggerating. Maybe misunderstanding something. Maybe overreacting. Because what I described sounded impossible. But then, he started reviewing the documents. Carefully. Slowly. Page by page. Cross-checking maps. Looking at boundaries. Comparing records. And the room went quiet. Completely quiet. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. The kind of silence that feels heavy. Like something isn't right. He leaned forward. Zoomed in on certain sections. Checked additional records. Then leaned back. Paused. Looked at me. And said something I'll never forget. Legally, this shouldn't exist. Not, this is complicated. Not, we need more time. Not, there might be an issue. No. Clear. Direct. Legally, this shouldn't exist. And in that moment, everything became real. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a serious legal problem. That's when the real investigation started. Not surface-level checking. Not basic verification. Deep research. We started digging into everything. County records. Zoning approvals. Construction permits. Development applications. Ownership timelines. Every document tied to that land. Every record connected to that. At first, it looked legitimate. There were initial filings. Some approvals. Some early-stage permissions. But when we looked closer, it fell apart. They didn't actually own the land. Not fully. Not legally. They had some form of temporary access agreement. Limited permissions. Possibly based on outdated or incomplete arrangements. But they never secured full ownership. Never completed the legal process required to build something like that. Some documents expired. Some approvals were never finalized. Some filings were incomplete. And yet, construction didn't stop. It continued. Step by step. House by house. Street by street. Until eventually, there was an entire neighborhood. Homes were built. Then sold. Families moved in. Life began. And over time, everything just continued. As if it was legitimate. As if it was fully legal. As if nothing was wrong. And here's the most shocking part. No one questioned it. Not the buyers. Not the authorities. not the system. Somehow, it all slipped through. Year after year, it became normal, accepted, invisible, until now, until I showed up, until someone with clear legal ownership looked at it and said, "This shouldn't be here." At that point, I had a decision to make, and it wasn't a simple one. I could go aggressive, immediately, file lawsuits, push for enforcement, try to remove everyone. Legally, I had the right to, but that path would destroy lives, families, homes, everything these people had built, and that didn't sit right with me. So I considered the other option. Handle it strategically, carefully, find a solution, without turning it into chaos. So I chose that path. I contacted the HOA board, requested a meeting. Formal, professional, direct. At first, they didn't take me seriously. I showed them everything. The documents, the maps, the legal ownership, line by line, point by point, and everything changed. The room shifted. You could feel it. Confusion turned into tension. Tension turned into defensiveness. They started pushing back, claiming they had rights, that everything was approved, that everything was legal, that they had been operating for years, that this wasn't new, that this wasn't a problem. But the deeper we went, the more questions we asked, the more documents we reviewed, the weaker their position became. And they knew it. You could see it. In their tone, in their reactions, in the way they avoided certain questions. Because deep down, they understood. The situation wasn't in their favor. Not legally. Not anymore. And that's when I made something clear. Very clear. I wasn't there to destroy lives. I wasn't there to throw families out of their homes. I wasn't there to create fear or chaos. But this situation couldn't continue like this. It had to be resolved. Legally. Properly. So I gave them options. We could negotiate. Find a solution that works for everyone. They could buy the land. Secure their position. Make everything legal. Or, we could go through legal action and let the system decide. And that's when everything became more complicated. Because now, it wasn't just a problem. It was a negotiation. A high-stakes one, with pressure on both sides. And no easy outcome. While negotiations were dragging on, I didn't sit still. I didn't just wait for updates. Or rely only on lawyers and meetings. Because something about this situation told me, if I wanted control, I had to understand every inch of that land. So I went back, again, and again, and again, not just to the edges this time, but deep inside. I walked it, drove through it, studied it, not like an owner, but like someone looking for answers, looking for weaknesses, looking for something others had missed. Because I knew one thing, situations like this always have a pressure point, something small, something overlooked, but powerful enough to change everything. At first, nothing stood out, just land, trees, open space, and that same neighborhood sitting inside it like it belonged there. But I kept going. Different routes, different angles, different times of day, watching, observing, paying attention to movement, patterns, behavior, and slowly, a detail started to become clearer. Not obvious at first, but consistent. Every time I entered, every time I left, every time I saw someone else moving in or out, it was always the same path, the same road, the same entrance. So I focused on it, watched it more closely, traced it from the outside, all the way in. And that's when it hit me. Not suddenly, but like a realization slowly locking into place. There was only one real access road into that entire community. One. No backup route. No hidden exit. No alternative entry point. Just one. Every car. Every delivery truck. Every resident heading to work. Every visitor arriving for the first time. They all used that same entrance. That same road. Every single time. I followed it carefully. From the main connection point. Through the outer land. Straight into the gated entrance. And when I checked the boundaries again, when I aligned it with the legal maps, there was ran entirely through my land. Not partially. Not shared. Not disputed. Completely mine. And in that moment, everything changed. Because suddenly, this wasn't about 2,300 acres anymore. This wasn't about hundreds of homes. This wasn't about a complicated legal battle that could drag on for years. No, this became something much simpler, much more focused. This was about one point of control, one piece of leverage, one decision that could shift the entire situation. And I understood it immediately. Because control isn't always about size. It's not about how much you own. It's about what matters most. And in this case, what mattered most was access. Without access, nothing works. Without access, homes lose value. Without access, communities stop functioning. Without access, everything falls apart. And I had it. I controlled it. That realization didn't make me react fast. It made me think carefully. Because there's a difference between having power and using it the right way. I could have blocked the road. Legally. Put up barriers. Restricted entry. Forced an immediate crisis. And yes, that would have worked. But it would have created chaos. Panic. Conflict. And that's not what I wanted. I wasn't trying to destroy anything. I was trying to resolve it. Smartly. Cleanly. Strategically. So I made a decision. I wouldn't escalate. I wouldn't threaten. I wouldn't force the situation. Instead, I would create a solution they couldn't ignore. I reached out again. Requested another meeting with the HOA board. This time, the tone was different. Not defensive. Not uncertain. Focused. Because now, I knew exactly where I stood. When we sat down, I didn't go over everything again. No long explanations. No repeated arguments. I kept it simple. Clear. Direct. I explained one thing. The entrance. The road. The access point. The ownership lines. Everything aligned perfectly. There was no room for interpretation. No gray area. Just facts. And then, I made my offer. I wasn't selling the land. I wasn't touching their homes. I wasn't asking them to relocate. I offered to sell one thing. The entrance. The access road. That was it. Nothing more. Nothing less. At first, there was hesitation. Silence. The kind of silence where people are processing something they didn't expect. Because they understood immediately what it meant. This wasn't a negotiation about land anymore. This was about survival. Because without that road, their entire community would collapse. Not physically, but financially, practically, functionally. Property values would crash. No access means no buyers. No buyers means no market. No market means no value. Deliveries would stop. Emergency services would struggle. Daily life would become complicated. Then impossible. Everything depended on that one connection. And they knew it. You could see it in their faces. In the way the conversation shifted. In the way the questions changed. Because now, they weren't arguing anymore. They were calculating. Understanding. Adapting. And just like that, negotiations began again. But this time, everything was different. The balance of power had shifted. Completely. Before, they believed they had control. They believed time was on their side. They believed this could be dismissed. But now, they understood the reality. And the urgency. Weeks went by. Not days. Weeks. Offers were made. Then adjusted. Then withdrawn. Then replaced. Conversations moved back and forth. Lawyers involved on both sides. Documents reviewed. Terms negotiated. Details refined. Every number mattered. Every condition mattered. Because this wasn't just a deal. It was a solution to a problem that should have never existed. There were moments where it felt like we were too far apart. Moments where tension rose again. But every time, the same truth pulled everything back. They needed that road. And eventually, after all the back and forth, all the discussions, all the delays, we reached a deal. A final agreement. Clear. Structured. Legal. They would purchase the entrance. The road. The access point. At a price that reflected its true value. Not its size. Not its length. But its importance. And just like that, the situation was resolved. No court battles. No forced removals. No public conflict. No chaos. The community remained intact. Families stayed in their homes. Life continued. And everything became legally secure. On my side, I kept the rest of the land. All 2,300 acres. Untouched. Still full of possibility. And I walked away with something else. A return that made the entire investment worth it. Many times over. But more than that, I walked away with something far more valuable. A lesson. A powerful one. Because this experience changed the way I see ownership. Completely. Most people think ownership is about how much you have. How big it is. How impressive it looks. But that's not what matters most. What matters is control. Understanding what actually holds value.